Good evening, everyone. I'd like to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome to the February meeting of the Peninsula Clean Energy Advisory Board. Before we get into the formal part of the meeting, we'd actually like to begin by taking a moment to acknowledge what we have all achieved. This county now has all 20 cities have agreed to participate in Peninsula Clean Energy.
Oh, that's okay.
And not only did all 20 cities agree, but there was not a single council member that cast a no vote.
Oh, wow.
So I think we've set a bar that probably no one else could achieve. I mean, it really is a testimony to the way we do things in the county and to everybody in this room on their respective councils or the advocates or others on the advisory committee and the staff. It is a major and really, I would say historic accomplishment to introduce this new model. Which, when you first hear about it, is a lot to digest, and then to have all these cities embrace it. So it is something we should all be very, very proud of. So what we'd like to do, since this is our last official meeting of the advisory committee, is take a moment to recognize each of you. We have prepared some commendations, and I'm sure my colleague Supervisor Groom will have a few words to say too. So let me pass the mic to Ms. Supervisor Groom.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Dave. I can't even work the microphone. Well, I just want to extend my thanks to when you look back at the work we have done and the attendance of every meeting. Both regulars and alternates, and our audience has grown and grown, and it's just been the input has been very interesting, and I hope everybody learned new things as well as the work we did, because it's certainly been an educational process as well. And I think I speak for Dave. I think we've been to every city council now at least once, and it's just been a pleasure to watch how your meetings operate and how your council operates and how efficient you've turned everything around so that the resolutions were passed and the ordinances were passed. It's really been quite an experience, and actually the journey has just begun. So thank you all for your really hard work. It's just been a pleasure to work with you during this first phase.
A couple other things to note. This is a big community choice energy program we are embarking on. The technical study reminds me that we have 298,435 electrical customers using 4,318 million kilowatt hours of electricity. So our goal is to have 50% or more of that renewable when we launch this program. And that's going to make a real measurable difference in the amount of carbon that we emit. So I'd also like to share with everyone a very beautiful commendation that was presented to us by the City of Menlo Park and the Mayor of Menlo Park. Where is Mr. Goethals?
San Mateo.
Oh, geez. All right, I should go home now. Starting again, the City of San Mateo presented us with this very, very nice commendation recognizing the importance of Peninsula Clean Energy.
It's the advisory committee. You mentioned how this committee and all the times that we've met since the very beginning with the leadership of the Board of Supervisors, but this is unprecedented with 150 jurisdictions or however many it is in San Mateo County and a few more every single day, the 21 jurisdictions coming together unopposed and unprecedented. So thank you very much for the leadership. But this advisory committee and the time that was put in and the amount of work that we got through to arrive at this moment with all the work ahead of us is fantastic. And I just think that achievement is something that should be recognized because there's so many other things that we face this is something that we could take and learn from and use it in many of the other things that the county's working on right now, whether it's housing or water or something else. So I look forward to that too.
I'm a hockey fan, and when you win the hockey NHL, you get the Stanley Cup. And what's really cool about the Stanley Cup is you get to like take it home and have pictures of it with you and your kids and your community. And so, I feel like everyone should take this home and have pictures taken. So thank you, Mayor Galtos, for that recognition and of the advisory committee's work. So we would like to provide each of you with a small token of our appreciation in the form of a commendation. So why don't we read each name. We'll just take them as they come.
Susie Ray.
Susie Ray.
Here.
Sue Chow. Sierra Club.
Sue.
Thank you, Sue. We'll keep those assigned. James Ruy Gomez from the San Mateo Central Labor Council and Landis Mateo. Let's see, these are going. Thank you, Landis. We'll be working together. No, he's not here. Stacy Hauer, I know, is here. I know Amanda Gorsom is here. I don't see. Jan Butts and Kirsten Schwind. Super advocate. We know. Brad Donahoe from Coma. Larry May's not here. And Jeff Elfs, who is sitting right here. Couple more. Daniel Yost and Pradeep Gupta. All right. Early. That's right, early. Haven't done much yet. And I know Mike McCord and Diane Bailey are here this evening. We have Lori Liu from Brisbane. Is Dante Hall from Fox Meeting? He's here. Oh, there's Dante. Of course. Larry Moody, I didn't see Larry. Pat Mattel, no. Lorenzo Hines, if you don't see Lorenzo. Ian Bain. Oh, really? Ian Bain and Cameron Johnson. Ian is here. Marty Medina. San Bruno.
Good comfort, dependable.
You know, the sheriff. Charles Stone.
It was amazing.
Wayne Lee. Mr. Lee is here this evening. Carlton is sick. And Marina Fraser, I don't believe is here. Is did I see George Roderick? No.
Pretty good.
All right. Well, that wasn't exactly like clockwork, but thank you all. Okay, we'll go back to our regular agenda. Our first item is to review and approve the minutes. Any comments on the minutes? Otherwise, we can take a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Second. We have a motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so that unanimously approved. This is the point in the meeting where we will take public comments from anyone in our big audience today who's joined us. If anyone would like to make a comment, please come to the mic here and introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Dr. Alexander Canera from Menlo Park. And I only found out about this whole plan about 3 weeks ago at a Sierra Club meeting. I know that we're all concerned for energy in the environment and doing things right because our descendants will depend upon that. I think everybody here agrees to that. At the meeting that I found out about this some weeks ago, we asked for a raise of hands who considered that we have to do wise work here for our descendants, and everybody put their hands up, as you might expect. Unfortunately, there's a lot of the Music Man. Everybody remember the Music Man, the old movie with Robert Preston? Comes to town. He's going to teach the kids music, get them band instruments, and they're going to stay away from the pool hall. Right? This is an old Midwestern kind of movie. Turns out he's been doing this at a lot of towns, and he gets the money from the parents for the instruments, but they never show up, and he kind of disappears. So we have to be very careful about this sort of thing, because once you decide that there are other places where you can get electrical power from, you then we commit ourselves to making sure that those sources of power are actually clean, actually environmental. And sadly to say, that's not always true. And I know you've probably discussed the business that exists in terms of fake certificates of greenness that get marketed and sold and so forth. So in order to do this kind of thing requires a lot of effort on our part. Our Joint Powers Authority has to do a lot of work to research what's going on, where you actually can get clean power. And actually, will there be enough of it for all the different organizations that want to have clean power? That's actually one of the hardest things. And listening to the radio coming here, the EPA announced that the gas leak we had in Aliso Canyon was the largest single release of methane ever in the history of the United States. It's equivalent to over 3 billion gallons of gasoline or diesel being burned in terms of its GHG potency. Now, a lot of that gas exists in California because, unfortunately, we are a gas state. Exists in storage and is fracked and transmitted around the state because we have unreliable sources of electricity that have to be backed up with gas, like wind and some solar. And the problem with all these nice pictures of windmills is that they are very low energy density, they consume a huge amount of land, they threaten species, and they wear out, and so they have to be replaced. The problem that we have to address is our own understanding of the reality. What is really going on here? I have a couple of handouts that people can have, but I only brought 10, so I'm going to have to be fighting for it. Marin County Journal, I think it is, said that, well, what are you really trying to do? Are you just mad at PG&E? Are we just mad at PG&E? And we're going to say, okay, you go to hell. We're going to get our electricity elsewhere. But, of course, the wires that PG&E owns and the transformers and so forth still have to be maintained. So it's not like we're actually getting rid of PG&E at all. So what are we really trying to do here that makes any sense for our descendants? Remember, they're going to be cleaning up after us. Every one of those windmills is going to wear out, maybe be substituted for by better sources, and they're going to sit there just like they sit down there in Kern County that has no recycling requirement, no decommissioning requirement. This has to be thought out very carefully, and I'm sorry that I didn't know about this whole thing beforehand much earlier. But it's crunch time. We don't really have any options to waste time encouraging wasteful sources of energy. We really don't. There's a topic that is big in the marine biologist world called ocean acidification, and that is not going to be addressed by eliminating emissions today, because the emissions that we already emitted over the last 200 and so years are already dissolving in the oceans, and nothing that we do today to bring our emissions today to zero will affect that. And there are species extinctions on schedule to occur in the oceans before 2050. So what the IPCC says about temperatures in 2100 is really kind of meaningless, because they have not, in fact, addressed the most serious problem of ocean acidification by the CO2 that dissolves in it every day, just like soda water. When you got soda water, it's got CO2 in it. You heat it up, the CO2 comes out, you cool it down, the CO2 stays in it. And that's unfortunately what's been going on in the ocean for the last 200 years.
If you could wrap up that.
Yeah, I will. I have some handouts that you can have. And I had sent a letter a couple of weeks ago to the supervisors about these issues and what should actually be done. If you want to have some clean power, which is fine, encourage people to have local solar on their roofs, on city buildings, which we don't have in Menlo Park that I know of. We've had a very difficult time with getting the Menlo Park Council to actually do things that would be directly helpful to the environment. There are a lot of things that you need to do to actually come up with a good plan, a good long-lasting plan, one that our descendants will be happy with. And I think that has not quite been done.
If
And
you
that's
could
my point.
distribute your materials to us, that'd be great. I'd be happy to talk to you after
Sure.
the meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Do we have any other people in the audience that would like to make any remarks? Could you just introduce yourself?
My name is Tom Cottrell. I'm a longtime resident of Pacifica. And congratulations to getting to this milestone so far. You can see a lot of work has been put into this. For full disclosure, I'm an employee of Solar City. I'm not here in the official capacity representing Solar City, just here as an interested private citizen. I reviewed the report, and I just have basically 3 comments. If I'm not mistaken, the report assumes a 1 to 2% decrease in overall electrical usage based on continued investments of energy efficiency programs. Well, this is a good assumption if we just consider the current uses. You might want to consider that the impact of electrification on the transportation system would cause a significant increase in the overall usage and planning of how much electricity we would need overall. So for a typical homeowner, 500 to 600 kilowatt hours per month, usage of an EV can increase that by 50 to 80%. Today, they're sort of penalized for doing that. And what I'm suggesting is that both in terms of the rate structure and the planning on how much capacity you might need in clean energy, this should be taken into account. EVs are entering third generation. Within the next few years, we'll see mass-produced vehicles and prices drop, and of course, mass adoption, we hope, of those vehicles. So that all will actually increase the usage of electricity, not decrease. Second point is that today's homeowners wanting to do the right thing in terms of electric appliances coupled with rooftop solar, they are restricted by PG&E's 110% rule. So they cannot install a system larger than 110% of their current usage. And this, of course, affects planning going forward. If through Peninsula Clean Energy, through a new net metering, if this could be changed, allowing homeowners to actually plan for the future, plan for buying an electric vehicle, and size their systems more appropriately for the future rather than the past, this would be extremely helpful to homeowners and much less expensive. And finally, the third point is that in terms of energy efficiency, I know we're still counting a lot on the energy efficiency programs and adoption by homeowners and businesses to improve their energy efficiency of what they currently use. But I'd like to suggest that right now, instead of being rewarded for individual investments, that there's some investments that a homeowner could make in terms of reducing their greenhouse gases, but they're not currently rewarded under the current energy efficiency program. For instance, to buy an electric vehicle, oftentimes they have to upgrade their main panel. That could be about a $4,000 expense. Nothing or no energy efficiency rebate or anything is covering that, yet that may be a significant impediment to adapting an EV. So if the energy efficiency program could be expanded to cover a broader range of things that all lead to further investments by the homeowners, that would accelerate the adoption of the transportation system, and also appliances, switching appliances from natural gas over to electric. This is a fairly expensive proposition. It does result in quite an increase in usage of electricity, but ultimately has to be done to get rid of the use of all fossil fuel and emission of greenhouse gases. Let's see. That's about it. Thank you very much for your work so far. It's much appreciated, and I think we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you for your comments. Any other speakers in the audience? Okay, well, seeing none, we will move to updates from Jim Engermeyer, who heads up our Office of Sustainability.
Good evening, everybody, and what a nice night to see you all for the kind of our last concluding meeting with the advisory committee. And with that, I have mainly 3 items to share with you. But before I do that, in front of you is a customer survey. And you are one of our customers here that we have with the Office of Sustainability. And all county offices are required to essentially evaluate their performance with our departments, and in turn with us, we're responsible to the county manager's office, and then in turn to the county board of supervisors. So for the last 9 months, we've been meeting, and I wanted to take this moment really for you to evaluate our efforts. And so there's 10 questions. If you could, over the course of this evening, fill that out and either give it to Kirsten, myself, or Gordon, or leave it there in front of you, I would really appreciate it very much. We would. So with that, I'd like to summarize some of our efforts, and I'll start by both supervisors. Dave Pine and Carol Groom had indicated our PCE JPA membership includes the county and the 20 cities, and what an accomplishment. Other accomplishments include 9 advisory committee meetings. We had 10 tabling events, 12 community workshops, 27 city study sessions and informational presentations, along with 40 presentations to community, environmental, and business groups over this last 9 months. We've also had, and this continues to grow, we have 232 members on our Facebook account, number of followers on our Twitter, as well as our mailing list having over 650 subscribers. And along with that, as we had initiated our efforts with the advisory committee, we established kind of our brand and our website and established some guidelines for how we would be presenting ourselves. And along with that, the collateral and producing all of the handouts that you've seen, including a trifold, our feasibility study guide, and our general FAQ sheet, and also the translation into 3 other languages, Spanish, Chinese, and Tagalog. And then last, I'd like to kind of summarize here with other items that we've been responsible for you, including kind of working with PEA on our detailed pro forma efforts, along with the cash flow that we are using to work with our banking partners and kind of reaching out to them to understand what the opportunities and possibilities will be for us. And then also a risk analysis summary table, extracting out those main items that were contained in the technical study and summarizing those. And then we've also recently completed the peer review of the technical study, and last month I had indicated the draft form of that, and it wasn't until just yesterday that we received kind of back the final comments or final document from our peer review, MRW Associates out of Oakland. And so we'll be posting that document here in the next week or two to our website. And then also, we're in the process right now of hiring a full-time person really to help out Gordon and Kirsten with our efforts and the JPA board. And we've had an interview process, panel interview, that has shortlisted 4 people, and next week another member from the Office of Sustainability and I will be interviewing the 4 final candidates for that particular position to help out the JPA. And then the last is the RFP for the data management aspects of this endeavor has been released, and that concludes kind of the county updates from the Office of Sustainability.
Questions for Jim?
Actually, could you go back to the last slide for just a
Sure.
second? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you all, and I really would, if you could, take a few minutes and fill out the customer survey. We'd really appreciate that. Thank you all.
Great, thanks, Jim. Okay, next we wanted to talk about the Citizen Advisory Committee, and how can we keep this, everyone involved who has been so committed to the process, so far. So this advisory committee consists of about 35 people, and there's 20 city reps and then about 15 others from various stakeholder groups. So many of the city reps will be joining, of course, the JPA as board members. But we really want to make sure that the other 15 stakeholders stay engaged during this whole launch process. So, in thinking about this, I think there's kind of two things that, two ways to do that, and both are important. One is, of course, is to come to the JPA meetings, which will get a schedule out as to when they're going to occur. And because there's so much to work on between now and the launch date, the meetings are going to be twice a month for the first few months. So there'll be plenty of meetings. And as we've done with the advisory committee meeting, we will have time for public comment, and I hope the 15 stakeholders who aren't joining the board would use that time, because you've all have good ideas. Secondly, we definitely want to have some kind of a citizens advisory committee on an ongoing basis for the JPA board. Now, it's ultimately the JPA board. It has to decide, what type of committee it wants and what type of membership it wants, and is there going to, how will selections be made? What are the duties of the committee? But the recommendation of the internal team to the Joint Powers Board is that at least during this launch period, or kind of through the end of the year, until such time as there's some formalization of what the JPA wants to do with the Citizens Advisory Committee, that the 15 stakeholders here in the room that aren't from the cities can continue, if they'd like to, continue to meet monthly with staff and members of the board that are, able to come in those evenings. So it'd be somewhat informal. And again, essentially now there'd be really 3 meetings a month, 2 board meetings and an advisory committee meeting. So, but we feel, it's really important to keep the stakeholders around the table here engaged. And that was kind of our internal thinking about how to proceed here. And then at some point, again, the JPA would formalize a committee advisory committee, and a citizens advisory committee, which again, likely many of you would then join as well. But again, the parameters of that would have to be kind of sorted out. And again, it wouldn't likely be done for a little while just because of everything else that's happening. I don't know if you want to add any comments or. So anyway, that's kind of the internal thinking, and happy to get some feedback on that. Again, from the 15 stakeholders, that we wish there was a way to have a 35-member board, but we really did need to have the cities on the board.
Dave,
Yeah.
can I make a comment on that? Is this working?
Yes.
All right. I was just thinking loudly that at this point in time of the Peninsula Clean Energy, we have structured the basic foundation and decided to start the Peninsula Clean Energy operation. But during the operation, there are several aspects that will have to be dealt with in more detailed and more continuity process. Some of them will be technical, some of them will be customer relations, some of them will be environmental related, some of them will be actually customers' own programs, energy efficiency programs, etc. So I think that there might be a structure coming out of this in the long run where some of these committees should include people more than just the board members, because board members may not be the best qualified people to be on those specific committees. And JPA board could decide what committees and what should be the structure, but I think there is an open ground for that sort of arrangement.
Right. I mean, the JPA board will have to decide what sort of committees it wants to constitute. And again, I would suspect the JPA board will want to have a citizen advisory committee, but again, the exact definition of that would have to be worked out. So, again, for the 15 stakeholders not from the cities, I mean, do you think, would that be attractive to you to continue meeting, coming once a month?
Sure.
Don't be too excited.
Could you say a little more about how you see that working?
Well, again, a lot is going to be happening, particularly in these first 3 or 4 months. So you know, you know, things are going to be constantly moving. So at each month, you know, I would foresee that obviously the advisory committee would be updated on everything that's happened, and then everything that's going to happen in the next couple weeks, and get all the input we can from the advisory committee on those upcoming decisions. And again, as I tried to emphasize earlier, obviously we'd welcome your input at the formal JPA meetings themselves, but it'd be a more informal setting to bat around some ideas.
And I really appreciate your sharing your thinking on this. I'm trying to get my head around a little more. So it would be sort of an informal meetings of the representatives who are here who aren't from cities?
Yes.
Okay.
So again, there's 15 folks in that category. And so, you know, maybe we'd have 10 at any given monthly meeting, and with staff and some board members. And, you know, for example, I could foresee, just brainstorming here, that, you know, one issue might be, you know, what do we look for in our energy procurement contractor? You know, because ultimately the board's got to make that decision, but important decision. And folks, this team would have some good ideas there. And again, if it was acceptable to the JPA board, you know, we could begin, you know, we could make sure we formally carry that input. I'm sure it'll be acceptable to, you know, to the JPA board. Yes. And okay, at the end.
So I think what you're referring to is like the Traffic Authority has a Citizens Advisory Committee, and that's a committee that actually reviews all the things that are coming to the authority's agenda and makes suggestions and recommendations. It's similar to that model.
Yes. Yeah, but the only qualifier being that when we're meeting twice a month, it won't be possible necessarily, unfortunately, to pass everything through the CAC first. But we'll pass as much everything that is possible would be, you know, we'll look into the future and say, here's things coming up. What do you think? But again, there's a lot. The board's going to be meeting a lot and making a lot of decisions pretty quickly. Yeah.
Do you imagine having maybe like a sort of a standing agenda item, which is just a report from the CAC each board meeting?
Yeah, I think
which could be
as
brief or as long as it needs to be.
Right. Or in my hypothetical, talking about the energy procurement contract, that would be a good opportunity for someone from the advisory committee to say, you know, we spent an hour talking about this, and here are our ideas, something like that. And again, something more formal and probably with a different structure would ultimately be adopted. But again, we don't want to lose all the smart people that have given so much to the effort. Yes, Diane.
So I just want to note that I was so happy to see this item on the agenda tonight, and of course we strongly support the idea and understand that the JPA needs to form and decide on the finer points of what this could look like. But I want to encourage, in the thinking of what it could look like, consideration of other groups not represented around this table. For example, this evening we heard really good comments from the gentleman from Solar City, and he seemed to have a lot of important information to add that is helpful, and so, you know, maybe we could consider broadening the group a little bit, not to become unwieldy, but just to make sure that we have all of the appropriate expertise represented.
Right. Again, I really see kind of two phases. This first phase, which, you know, the first meeting would probably be in April, because the JPA is going to have its first meeting in March. So say April to the end of the year. You know, the 15 stakeholders would be invited, and if we wanted to invite other people, I think that'd be fine too. It'd be, you know, it could be pretty informal, but at some point the JPA will decide, you know, what formal citizen advisory committee it wants. But speaking for myself, I wouldn't see any issue of bringing in some other people on a particular topic, or inviting a few more people. But again, we're really trying to focus. The focus is clearly the core is clearly the 15 people that aren't city members.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we will bring this idea to the JPA board, and assuming that it is approved, you know, get dates out to you, and try to develop agendas that are in sync with the upcoming policy discussions of the JPA board. James?
Yeah, could I just make one comment before we move on?
Of course.
Everybody who's up there that's hopefully going to be on the JPA, it's quite evident what labor wants is that when renewable projects are being built in the area for this PCE, that they're done at area standard wages or under a project labor agreement. Ensuring the sustainability of our communities, hiring locally, giving the veterans that are coming out of war, fighting for our freedom, have an opportunity to join an apprenticeship program and get trained so they can join the middle class. And that's what we hope to get as labor from this JPA, and we hope that we can count on you all to do that without a bunch of citizens, without us packing the room and making it quite evident that that's what the citizens want. So thank you for allowing us to participate. It was very educational, and I'm glad to be part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being involved. I hope you come to these meetings, the monthly meetings at least.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, then we will bring this to the JPA board, and I'm highly confident that we'll be able to have this kind of informal monthly meeting through the end of the year. And we'll give a lot of thought to making these meetings as productive as we can. Okay, then very good. So we're now going to move to the review of the Peninsula Clean Energy Implementation Plan, and Civic Energy Advisor is going to help us walk through that. And as you know from our prior discussions, this is one of the first. This will be one of the first actions of the JPA board would be to approve this plan. Likely to occur at the second meeting of the JPA board, and it's one of those key first steps as we move towards the launch. I'll turn over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is John DeLessie with Pacific Energy Advisors, and you'll hopefully remember me from last month where we talked for quite a while really about what an implementation plan is and some of the considerations in putting it together. Mention that a template exists that's been used successfully by the 3 operating CCA programs. Since that time, we've had a chance to draft up an implementation plan using that template. And we're going to go through it. Now, I'm not going to, don't worry, go page by page. It's about 50 pages. But since a lot of it is template-based, there's really only a few key areas, I think, that warrant a lot of discussion and input, quite frankly. And so those areas have been highlighted in yellow on the plan itself. And also, I know Gordon has developed a separate document that I think you all have that is just excerpts of those primary provisions that are highlighted and sort of subject to more discussion.
Does everyone have this was a smart idea by Gordon, it's just 2 pages front and back. And this kind of the language that really want to focus on tonight. Okay.
Yeah, thanks. And we
wait.
Is there a question there?
No, I need a
copy.
Are there more out on the front page?
Hold on. Wait a second. I don't think everyone got a copy. Gordon, do we have a couple more?
Yeah, thank you.
We need a couple up here, Gordon, in the front. Here's an extra. Thank you. Do you need it? Okay.
Okay, so I think everybody has a copy. So the first area is really the concept of the program enrollment schedule or the customer phase-in plan. And this is a large program, as I think everybody is aware, and it's wise, we think, to break enrollments into multiple phases. Very common practice as well. So some of the considerations in coming up, okay, what should be how should we break this up into phases? How many phases should we have? How big should each be? I mean, some of the considerations really get to, I think there's a general desire to move this along quickly, to get this service offered as quickly as is practical. And then, but, you know, making sure that the organization is ready, right? I mean, that's a key consideration, and that's one of the reasons you phase to begin with. You don't want to offer service to 300,000 customers, and maybe your systems aren't quite up to speed to handle that level of let's say, customer calls into the call center or that type of thing. So, you know, organizational readiness, just the ability to have communicated with your customers effectively. So that plays into the number of accounts that are included in these enrollment phases, and, you know, particularly that first phase, really, really key, as well as the types of customers that are in that first phase. And so what we've developed here as a proposal is that there would be 3 phases of customer enrollments, and this would be completed over a 12-month period. So first phase begins in October of this year. Phase 2 is 6 months later. Phase 3 is 6 months after that, so that would be the third phase is October 2017. So you're at full rollout within 1 year. That's aggressive, you know. But it's certainly doable. And, you know, you get the advantage of getting to scale rapidly that way. In terms of the composition of the phases, phase 1, it would include all of the small and medium commercial customers throughout the entire region, so 100% of those customers, and a subset of residential customers. And so we're played around a little bit with, okay, what's a reasonable size of that first phase? And based on what's been successful to date, we're thinking around 70,000 service accounts would be a reasonable number to strive towards. So taking all of the small and medium commercial accounts, which is, that represents about 22,000 service accounts, and then about 20% of all the residential customers would bring that up. That would be about 46,000 residential customers. So that would bring that total first phase up to just under 70, so about 68,000 service accounts. Yes, sir.
Question, this phase design is for the implementation, actually providing the electrical energy to the 20% of residential customers. But in terms of our plan of kicking off PCE, there was a 60-day period in which customers could opt out. Now, does that 60-day start for everybody, 100% of the customers at the start of the PCE, or only 20% of the customers are the ones who will be informed about opting out option? I'm not clear on that.
Yeah, thanks. So each phase would be notified separately and have that opt-out opportunity, that window, start separately. So in October, so the first notice is if we're hitting an October enrollment date for the customers to actually switch over, those first customer notices would go out in July and August. And those notices would only go to those customers eligible for, you know, that's been sort of selected for phase 1. The other customers would get their notices closer to when they're scheduled for enrollment. Yes?
How would customers be selected for phase 1?
Okay, so that's a really good question. And so the first category, all small and medium, is easy because it would be done based on rate schedule. So there's, you know, customers, very easy to select all customers served on a certain rate schedule that correspond to these small and medium commercial uses. Trick is with residential, right? So how should those be selected? And what we've heard generally sort of from staff is that there's a desire that service be offered at the same time to all of the cities. You know, that seemed to be a desired policy. Something, you know, certainly would be, you know, like to hear confirmation of that tonight, or if there's opposing views to that. So what we've done in the past, what we did with Sonoma Clean Power, for instance, is we worked up essentially a random selection based on customer account number. So, you know, how that's done exactly, I mean, I think there's a number of ways to do that, but the idea would be, it would essentially, for the residential piece, it would be a random selection, but it would be designed to cover representation from all of the different cities.
Well, I agree that all cities should get this at the same time. I wonder if instead of random selection, maybe people can opt in to be one of the early adopters, and then amongst them, there can be random selection. So you may only get 1 in 5 customers saying, I want to be among the first to have this.
Yeah, so I think you can have that feature as well, where you allow customers who elect to participate early. I don't think, though, relying on opt-ins will get you the numbers that you want. Just typically, the numbers of customers that are taking action to opt into a program wouldn't come close to the 20%. So I think that would be the risk there, is that you might not get as much load as you're anticipating. But that's, if that were the desire, that could be a way of doing it.
I mean, so that may be true. I don't want to debate with you about this, but I think there's a lot of interest in the customers right now of being some of the early adopters. And if there isn't, maybe then that random system could be used to bring it up to 20%. What I'm concerned about is people who really want to be a part of this program now being left out and wondering when they're going to get their turn.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, if they end up being in the third phase, when they're the ones that really want to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And other programs have allowed customers who really want in to participate by picking up the phone regardless of their scheduled enrollment phase. It's an interesting idea, though, to rely on that voluntary enrollment as kind of gather those enrollees, and then if you don't have enough of them, then go to that random. I mean, that could be done as well.
So what is the time frame for each phase, and when will all customers be enrolled?
Right. So within 12 months, all customers would be enrolled. So it's a pretty rapid rollout. So it's essentially 6 months apart. October of 16 for phase 1, April of 17 for phase 2, October of 17 for phase 3. Yes?
An idea, it certainly wasn't mine, I'm trying to remember if it came from this group even, was maybe like a phase 1A that might focus on like municipal accounts, us, so that, if something does go wrong with that very first rollout, you've got people that are definitely going to be committed and stay on, as opposed to sort of the very first thing that goes out being to people that might get spooked up by this and go away.
Okay.
Is that possible? Is it?
It is possible. So the downside with that is that you don't get much scale. So that would be a pretty small phase, and it's probably going to honestly lose money, kind of cause you to bleed cash until you get bigger.
Okay, that's my question.
And John, I know we posed the question as to whether municipalities would likely fall into that small and medium commercial accounts. I mean, the actual city municipality PG&E account.
Yeah, so the muni facilities they're probably spread with those small, medium, as well as some large. Now, you could, as part of phase 1, include all the municipal facilities, and so pick them out specifically.
Regardless of size.
If that was desired. Yeah, regardless of the rate schedule.
Even just to make sure that we're keeping tabs on the municipal accounts, to make sure that if that we spot the problems before they get too widespread among the other commercial accounts, even if they all go out at once, but we're sort of just coordinating.
Yeah.
I have a comment.
Yes.
I think that what is most important is that we roll it out in a way so that it's economically viable. We don't want to take a risk by rolling it out to too small of a base. We want this to be a financially successful operation, and we of course want to increase the amount of renewables and decrease the cost for all of the customers that will be on it. Now, I mean, we did have an unusual situation in San Mateo County where 100% of those voting on our city councils voted for it. So this has obviously got very broad support within our county. I don't know if that means if we went out for, who wants to opt in to be in the first group, if that means you'd get more interest than the, whatever it is, 46,000 residential accounts you desire. I'll just throw out an idea. I mean, one thing I think that we want to do toward our goal of increasing our use of renewables is to encourage people to deploy solar panels where they can and to use electric cars or cars that are hybrids that have an electrical capacity to them. So one idea that just came to my mind when you said that one way you've done it before is by using rate schedules. We think that people really want it, and I think that my constituents want it. We could prioritize those rate schedules, and we could publish it. So if you're on an E7 or an E6 rate schedule or an EV rate schedule, you could be in that first 46,000. Maybe that, I'm sure that would push some people to make the decision to deploy PV that are on the fence to doing it. And I think we want to encourage that to the extent that we can. I don't know how much impact that would be. I do think that the most important thing is that we make this economically viable and that we show that we know what we're doing and that it's well structured and that it's going to be an economic success.
Yeah, if I could follow up on that. And John, you may want to speak to how the rollouts have occurred in some other CCAs, but I mean, I think your point is critical about the financial viability of the rollout, and also it has to be a great user experience. And we do have a challenge, a good challenge here in the county, because some of the other our predecessors, they only had a subset of their county that was interested. So that kind of drove our thinking was, if you were going to do 20%, you'd clearly want to give share that across the cities. But John, it probably would be helpful. One thing I think John could put in perspective is this would be a bigger rollout than anyone's ever done in their first launch. Maybe you could speak a little bit to the other.
Yeah. Thank you for that. It would be the biggest phase one by a long shot. So, I mean, if you go back to Marin, their first phase was 5,000 customers roughly. Lancaster went with a municipal facilities only approach for a period of 4 or 5 months, and then went to everybody. So that phase two was big. Sonoma went all commercial, so the entirety of their commercial and industrial customers was their phase one. So not that many numbers of customers, but a lot of load. And then pretty quickly, within 6 months, went to everybody as a phase two. So this would be a big phase one, but these mass enrollments have been done, and they've been done successfully. I think the economics, absolutely, we 100% support that comment that you need to make sure that the program is viable and self-sustaining from the get-go as quickly as possible and generate cash to fund operations, minimize any need to bring in external financing. So that all plays into it. The other thing is, the greatest power of the CCE program is the opt-out nature. That's how you get 90% of the customers enrolled. We're trying to rely on opt-ins. You're talking about a massive marketing campaign to get people to take action, and it's sort of you're not playing to your strength with that type of an approach as your primary enrollment strategy. That's my opinion anyway.
One comment, maybe just one idea, and it sounds like you might be doing this anyways, is go with what you think is the most efficient enrollment strategy, but just make it clear that if someone wants to be at the front of the line, they can go to the website and sign up and be at the front of the line, and then have it happen at such a time frame that you then put, you've got to do it by X date, and then assuming you do that, you'll be in the phase one, and then there's fewer numbers at random that you need to pick. That might be a way to both, meet Ian's objectives and others of ensuring that people that want to be in early are in. There's at least an opportunity. It means you don't need to do a big marketing campaign, and equally you're, meeting Rick's and the rest of our objectives of being, doing this in a financially thoughtful manner.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, and you might even, picking up on the idea of incentivizing people. You might say you can opt in early if you choose the 100% renewable product, for instance, or if you have some other sort of policy you're trying to push. That's an idea too.
Diane?
I wanted to chime in on that point, because PG&E has done a soft rollout of their green option. And so I'm just a little concerned that customers who really want to opt for the 100% renewable, and if they feel like their incorporation into PCE will be delayed and they enroll in PG&E's program, will PCE lose those customers? And so would we want to kind of extend an opening to folks who want the 100% green option to enroll early?
Yeah, that's another good point. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of good reasons why allowing the early volunteers seems to make sense.
I mean, I think that the challenge, there's no question that someone wants to be in the first phase. We want them to be in the first phase. I think where it gets more complicated is, how extensively do we market that opportunity, and try to actively encourage that versus focusing on 20% and anybody else who is focused on it and on the website or through word of mouth. Sure, come on in. So that you have to kind of decide the scope of your outreach. Another point too, I just wanted to share with everyone, if I didn't last time, was we had our first meeting with the team at PG&E that's responsible for community choice aggregation programs, and it was really, really encouraging. They, are really good at this now, and no, seriously, they've, as we've said many times, good thing we're not the first. But so they worked with Marin, they worked with Sonoma, they're working with San Francisco. San Francisco is launching in May, and for reasons I'm not quite sure about, they're only going to start with 7,000 customers, if I'm not mistaken, John. But anyway, the point being that they were confident that they could accommodate this rollout or even a larger one, but they were very clear that if there's going to be more pressure on us to have all our systems in place, because there's only certain things that they're responsible for, and legally we are responsible for other things. So the constraint really is more driven by our ability to ramp up than PG&E's.
Yeah, so I think that's a good point. So what are the constraints? There's our ability just to be operationally ready. So ready to provide customer service, ready to have the marketing campaign, make sure the call center is up and running, all those types of stuff. The other constraint potentially is how much startup capital is available, right? So we're in discussions with banks.
Right.
We're exploring potential loans to cover those initial few months where the cash isn't there yet. And so changing the composition. So if we were to go bigger, for instance, for phase one, then that's going to increase the need for capital. So that's another factor. But I think the main thing, is really just making sure that we're ready to provide excellent service to the customers, that their experience is very good. One of the reasons why Phase 2 is proposed to include those really large commercial and industrial customers is really kind of just to help provide more time to effectively outreach to those heavy users. So the first phase is more the mass market, the small, medium, and then a bunch of residential customers. Phase 2 is primarily the largest commercial and industrial customers. And then we also pick up some more residential in that phase. 35% of the residential customers would be included in phase 2. Again, that's April of 2017, so that's 6 months after the first phase. And then the last phase is everybody else, so that would include the remaining residential. So we have 45% of that group left that would be picked up in phase 3. And then there are other customers that are agricultural and pumping customers, street lighting, traffic control. So essentially, everybody else would be enrolled at that point. Now, one thing, if you look at the document, you'll see, we do retain quite a bit of flexibility in regards to adjusting these phases as the board sees fit, based on experience. One of the ideas behind phasing is that if things aren't going as expected, you change course, right? So that flexibility is built in. You'll see, I think, a number of words that basically state that even here we have phase 4 if necessary. We don't anticipate phase 4, but if it became necessary, additional phases could be put into place, and you could change course a little bit. Yes?
Yeah, John, I'm not sure if you have touched upon this or not because I wasn't present at the last meeting, but can you give us some idea of what will be outsourced and what will be done in-house? I mean, I'm sure the energy trading part will be outsourced, the daily schedule coordination and all of that, right? But what are the our main areas that would be done in-house?
Okay.
You mentioned call center and all that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think what we can assume would be outsourced, that's probably the easier place to start, would be power supply, the scheduling coordination that you mentioned. So sort of that operational, managing the energy requirements. That would be done pursuant to a contract that the JPA would write through the competitive solicitation process. And then the other large service that you would expect to be outsourced would be what's generally called the data management role. So that would include the call center, that would include the billing. So PG&E does the billing, but PCE needs to tell PG&E how much to collect. So there's very tight coordination there. That would be outsourced. Systems are necessary to be able to effectively do that in experience as well. Now the rest of it, I don't know. I mean, that's up to management and whether they want to hire a bunch of staff to handle regulatory affairs, for instance, and in-house legal, resource planners, or if they want to contract that out. So the document, the implementation plan, does not. It's sort of agnostic. It says these are the needs. There would either be staffed or contracted out, depending on the decisions of management and the board. So I think those are decisions that are yet to come.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So will the call center won't be in our county, or it will be in our county, or
Well,
in our state?
Yeah.
It will be?
I mean, so there is an RFP that's been put out, right? So, I think that's to be determined based on the evaluation of the proposals that come in.
So it's up to the JPA to ensure that there's decent jobs with healthcare and maybe something to retire on, and it's not just getting outsourced to another country?
I would expect that would be, yeah, I mean, I would expect that would be something that they would want to make sure doesn't happen. But, yeah, that's not really within the scope of the implementation plan. That's really through a separate process that.
Right, that's a JPA contracting decision.
Yeah.
One thing that in our internal discussions, we made an assumption, and we just checked this assumption, was that every city would likely want to be involved, have an opportunity to be involved in the first phase. But I suppose it's possible the city could say, hey, I'll wait 6 months, make sure you guys don't screw it up. I mean, is that you think the cities all the cities represented tonight, pretty eager to be in the first phase, or is that a fair assumption?
I think there's certainly some individuals, I suspect.
I think it's a good way of leading by example, that we all voted for it and we all signed up for it first, and it should be a strong, bold statement that this is something we believe in, that we need to do. So that's my.
Yeah, it's always hard using the word city. What I was referring to is having 20% of your residents in the first phase, as opposed to your own municipal account. I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think
it's easy. I mean, it's simple for all of us to put our municipal accounts in, right? But my assumption internally has always been that since there's so much excitement across all the cities, that it would be hard to say, well, you 10 cities get to go first, and then you 10 have to wait 6 months. So that was this notion that every city would have this percentage of participation.
I can find us some customers.
All right.
Control Valley.
No, I think it's important that it be across all cities.
Right.
There be some method that goes across all cities. I mean, whether it's rates, random, or some adjustment for opt-ins for one or another, that's all fine. But I think it needs to be available and intended to go throughout all cities.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. Good.
If you're going to do the opt-in and allow people, anybody to opt in, if a card went out to my house and it said, you're currently scheduled to be in phase 3, However, if you'd like to opt in now, you can. Here's how to do it. Here's the website.
That'd be a good idea.
Um,
I like
You know,
that.
that way if I know I'm already in phase one, great, I don't have to do anything. But if I'm in phase three and I want to be in now, here's how I do it. And that way you're also, you know, part of your first mailings to make sure every household hears about it.
That's interesting.
And my guess is the number of people doing that would be manageable. I don't think it would.
Oh, it would be
be everyone. It would be, you know, be a few thousand more people want to go into phase one.
Yeah.
I think that's.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the question will be, again, keeping the communication clear and making sure we can handle it all.
Yeah, no, I think maybe as this progresses and this data manager, at least through the interview process, I mean, the potential concern I would have is if you drop mail on 300,000 people, that you get a lot of calls, that, you know, and that could be an issue, but it's not necessarily. It's just, you know, that would be something to think through and probably talk it through with the experts who provide those services. Okay, so
I was probably, get to our next section.
Yeah. So we can move on then to the next section, and so this would be Chapter 6, the Load and Resource Plan, and I think probably the most relevant issues here would be, you know, the targeted resource mix in terms of renewable content. So we've written in that the program would start with at least 50%. Again, there's some flexibility there. So if when all the costs are said and done and brought together, maybe there's an opportunity to increase that a little bit. That could still be done and be consistent with the plan. But the idea would be to start with a service offering that's at least 50% renewable energy, and then also offer on a voluntary basis the 100% renewable energy. So the resource plan and the contracts that would be written would, you know, buy enough renewable energy and other energy to be able to supply that overall resource mix. So that's one piece. And then we also articulate some policies that may be of interest, and, you know, people might want to discuss those a little bit above here. So I'll just read them. So it says, PCE will seek to increase use of renewable energy resources and reduce reliance on fossil fuel electric generation. PCE will manage a diverse portfolio to increase control over energy costs and maintain competitive and stable electric rates. PCE will help customers reduce energy costs through investment in and administration of enhanced community energy efficiency, distributed generation, and other demand-reducing programs. And the PCE will benefit the area's economy through investment in local infrastructure projects and energy programs. So I think those are generally in alignment with what I've heard expressed, but, you know, to the extent that there's something missing here, or there's some massaging here, that, you know, we can certainly do that. So. Any comments on this section thus far? Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thank you. These goals look good. I had a sort of a small technical question. Are you considering rooftop solar as what category are you putting that here?
So rooftop solar, in terms of how it fits into the resource plan.
Right. It could. Some people would consider energy efficiency. Some would say it's distributed generation.
Yeah.
What pot did you put it in?
Right. So we put it in its own pot, just distributed generation. So you know, the way that we look at it. So we don't count that as the part of the 50%. And you can't for regulatory purposes, you know, in terms of reporting your power content label, the renewable portfolio rules. That doesn't count as of now anyway. Maybe that changes down the line. So so that's treated separately. So we start with sort of gross load, and then back off incremental energy efficiency, and back off incremental distributed generation. And then what's left over is what we then supply with 50% renewable energy, right?
I have a question.
Yes.
So In Marin and Sonoma, let's take the call center. That's probably the easiest thing to. Those are two separate call centers for Sonoma and Marin. They're not combined, correct?
It's the same company, and so I'm not sure. They may be combined.
So it's outsourced. It's not. Those aren't county jobs. They're not municipal jobs. It's a private entity that handles the call center.
Right. So that service is provided by Noble Energy Solutions. So they're based out of San Diego. Well, they belong to a global company, but the company itself,
Noble Energy.
yeah, is in San Diego. They have a call center in Santa Rosa, and I think they have one in San Diego as well. But so yeah, that's what I know about those call centers.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay, then the next section would be rate setting. And really, other than some fairly, I would say, common articulated objectives here in regards to the rates that would be offered, they'd be competitive. They'd offer the voluntary 100%, which we've already covered. We strive for stability in not having changes in rates as frequently as maybe is the case with the current situation. Equity among customers, customer understanding, revenue sufficiency. These are fairly generic, I'd say, or standard sort of objectives when setting rates. So I don't think there's a whole lot here. It's not particularly detailed. It doesn't reference specific cost differences other than the objective that the rates for the default product would be essentially at or below PG&E or something to that effect, competitive with, near parity, something to that effect. I think the idea has been discussed is, some point we're going to get bids from power suppliers. There's going to be an evaluation. There's going to be a calculation of what rates based on those costs and the other costs of programs, what rates could PCE charge, and those better be at or below PG&E in order for the decision to go forward, sort of the green light to execute those supply contracts and launch the program. We can be sure about that. Year one, we can have a reasonable expectation in subsequent years, but we can't guarantee it in subsequent years that you'll always be below. We've talked about that before. So that's, there's, I think, generally the way it's characterized in the plan is this is largely kind of standard language that's been used with other programs. Yes?
So Chapter 7 and Chapter 6 talk a little bit about our goals in terms of, I'll broadly call it demand-side reductions. And I guess my question, it's maybe even a little bigger than the implementation plan, is how dependent are we on PG&E's distribution network for some of those demand-side things? Like if we want more distributed generation, how dependent are we on PG&E upgrading their infrastructure so that we can distribute generation, so we can incorporate storage or even demand reduction, demand flexibility?
Yeah, well, very, in short, right? It's their distribution system, and if you're trying to, let's say, contract with a local renewable generator,
yeah,
it's really generally going to be on the developer of that system to get through that process and get interconnected.
Could our local infrastructure, and we talk about investing, could our local infrastructure projects include grid upgrades, or is that all PG&Es? Is that just off limits to us?
Yeah, well, I think for all practical purposes, it's off limit. I'm not sure. Sometimes the generator has to pay to upgrade the distribution system or the transmission system, and that cost is usually put on the generator. Maybe there's something that PCE could do to help with that, or I think there may be some things there, but in terms of direct investment, I don't think that's within the scope of a CCE program. It's really the purview of the distribution utility. Yeah.
But wouldn't storage generally just have an investment in storage ameliorate any problems in terms of upgrading the system? Because if you can generate electricity and store it, then you don't necessarily have to make improvements in the distribution system. The distribution system will accept that electricity when it's needed.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of some parts of the network where, you know, PG&E I know is sort of struggling with too many solar rooftops on one feeder line. I mean, it's probably more out where I am than where most people are. I just thinking about
higher income areas.
where the bottlenecks. What's that?
Problem. Higher income areas have that problem. It's
True.
It's just true.
It's true. I know what you're saying. Yeah,
It's just
agree.
true.
Yeah,
and,
okay.
you know, the way it is.
We have a lot of solar rooftops as well. So.
And actually, that's part of the reason for the 110% limitation of solar city individuals talking about. It's just, you got to think of the distribution system as kind of like a blood circulation system. The veins can only handle so much.
And we're on the capillaries, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
That's good. Good way of thinking about it.
Thank you.
Yes.
I had a question about the tariff, about the rate setting part that you mentioned. And I think we have gone through that discussion in one of the earlier meetings. Perhaps we can kind of refresh my memory on that. Now in this report, there are basically two tariffs, at least from conceptual point of view, 50% renewables and 100% renewables, two tariffs. But then we are talking about the rate structures, which might include like demand reduction programs of PG&E or net energy metering that PG&E offers, or many other rate structures or rate designs that PG&E offers to their customers today. Now, my question is, are we going to just look at those structures as they are with PG&E and just replace the generation cost part of it and leave the remaining complex structure as it is, or we are going to be revisiting the whole rate structuring in order to make it more compatible with our needs? What is your view on that?
Yeah, okay, so, I mean, that ultimately is a decision for the board and how it wants to structure its rates. And so you're right. We won't just have two tariffs. So maybe this could use a little clarification. We'll really have two basic service offerings and a multitude of tariffs because, I mean, I think our assumption is you're going to essentially replicate PG&E's rate structure. And you don't have to do it that way. I think we might have talked about this a little bit last month, but you don't have to exactly replicate the structure, but I think there are good reasons for doing it, and one of the most important ones is transparency so that customers can very easily see how their costs stack up, how PCE's rates compare to PG&E's. If you've got apples and oranges there, if you know, PG&E has a time of use rate and you have a flat rate, it's not so easy to figure that out. And so I think that's an advantage. And then the other advantage really to having the same structure is making sure you don't have winners and losers, because anytime you force a different structure on some people, if they use all off-peak or all on-peak, they might actually have a higher cost with you because of the difference in the rate structure. And that is I think that confuses the message if you're coming in and saying we're lower cost. So I think you'll probably wind up with a rate structure that looks very similar to PG&E, and then you'll have this voluntary element to it too, which is really typically just a simple adder to that, just a cents per kilowatt hour additional charge. So it doesn't take the rate structure and say now times two. It's just one option that adds an incremental cost to that. But that would be my expectation. But that's not written in stone. I mean, that is a board decision, and that would be part of the rate setting process.
So I think there's two different issues here. One is what the general structure of what we offer is going to be, and what this paper suggests is a 50% renewable option, a 100% renewable option, recognizing the 100% renewable option will be at a premium to what PG&E is currently offering, and hoping that the 50% renewable option will be both more renewable than PG&E offers and somewhat less in terms of cost. And I think that's a reasonable approach. But when the board looks at what the rate structure is, we're going to have to spend a whole meeting on this. PG&E right now has 6 rate structures for residents. And you can choose, some of them you can't choose, but there's one, if you have an electric vehicle, you can opt into an electric vehicle rate structure, which is a totally different rate structure than their E1 rate structure. And if you have solar, you can choose one of 3 different rate structures. I know, I went through it with them yesterday for 2 hours on the phone. So they're very complicated, Some of them don't only have one tier, and some of them have different tiers based on what your usage is, and the cost goes up if you use more. And some of them have, on-peak, off-peak, and some of them have partial peak. So they're very complicated, and it will take time for all of us to really walk through them. We can't do it here. I mean, it seems reasonable that if you've got people that are on a current rate structure, they come over to us from PG&E, that they would be on the same rate structure, but we have to know more about this. It's a complicated thing, and we're going to need to spend some time studying it and make sure that we feel good about that. There are certainly reasons why PG&E structures their rate structures the way they are, and believe me, they are not self-evident.
No, and if you're starting from scratch, you wouldn't design their rate structure. I mean, some of these things are just sort of leftovers, and they don't want to eliminate the schedule because that's going to negatively impact some customers, so they grandfather them, and it just sort of grows.
Yeah.
So, I agree with you. I think it's a whole separate meeting probably to talk about rates.
But to follow up on that interesting analysis, with the existing CCAs, they bring over all that complexity, just layer right in.
Yeah, yes. Generally, with Lancaster, we tried to simplify and eliminate. So let's say there's only 15 customers, residential customers, on this particular option. So let's do away with that in the interest of simplicity.
Uh-huh.
And what happened is we started with that, and then 6 months later, we went back to introducing that option because customers were complaining or what have you. So I think that the trend is really towards having pretty much comparable options as the utility.
Also, John, I had a question for you. I guess it was in Chapter 6, but the point is made that we want to administer programs to reduce net electricity purchases by 1% to 2% annually. And I think one of the speakers in the audience, as we're all aware, there's a growth in electric vehicles. We hope there's going to be an exponential growth in electric vehicles. So can we reconcile that growth with this kind of goal?
Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. I skipped over that. What chapter? Okay, that was chapter 6? 7? Yeah, okay. All right, so what we're saying here is that when talking about customer programs to reduce net energy, electricity, so we're really talking about distributed generation, so promoting more rooftop solar and energy efficiency programs, demand response programs, and these are incremental to what PG&E is already doing. So those programs don't go away. Customers still can take advantage of that. So these really reflect incremental reductions, essentially caused by PCE's administration of new programs. Not yet defined, by the way, right? What those programs are. So this is more of a target. So then, I guess the question is, well, what about electrification of the transportation system? Yeah, that might happen. I mean, the thing is that this is these forecasts. Once you get into operation, I mean, these are dynamically updated, right? So as things change, as EVs are deployed, you change your forecast. Typically you're going to engage in an annual long-term resource planning process where you're updating all the numbers. So I think it's just important to keep in mind that it's really kind of a dynamic forecasting effort, and this is really more indicative and kind of a snapshot in time. So to directly answer the question, we didn't really account for electrification as part of the forecast here. But once you're in business,
that makes sense.
It'll happen, right?
Well, just related to that, will we be bound by what's in this document? And so if we say something this specific and electric cars take off, will this limit us in any way or no?
No. This is really trying. The reason we include this information is getting back to the requirement of implementation plan to essentially describe how the program will be organized, operated, and funded. I mean, that's fundamentally it. So a lot of this information is really context to paint a picture, but typically you file this once, and then this program may exist forever, right? And so other policies, other practices, other documents, and in planning exercises really overtake this. This is a one-time registration requirement for the most part, but we want it to be reflective of what we intend to do as best as we know it now. But it doesn't lock you down in that way.
Thank you.
Okay, and then, so I think the last item here, this is Chapter 9, Customer Rights and Responsibilities. And, one of the things that we've included here is a concept of a termination fee. And so let me explain what we're talking about here. So the customers that are enrolled, so first of all, they would receive the 2 pre-enrollment notices explaining the program, explaining how to opt out if they don't want to participate. Assuming they don't respond to those notices by opting out, they would be enrolled automatically according to their phase-in schedule. And then they would get 2 more notices once they're receiving service from PCE, again, saying, you're in, welcome, whatever you want to say on there, and if you want to opt out, this is how you do it. And that is what's generally termed sort of the free opt-out period. Customers can return, either stay with PG&E or return to PG&E, all the same terms and conditions. After that 60-day period post-enrollment, so they've been taking PCE service for 2 months, if the customer then decides they want to return to PG&E or maybe even go to a direct access provider for that matter, then the terms can change. So that customer, the other programs have established a fee, a fairly nominal fee for customers that want to switch after that opt-out period. So that's what we've captured here, relatively nominal charge of $5 for residential customers if they want to switch after that opt-out period, and $25 for non-residential customers. Now, there's also been, in the case of MCE, for instance, Marine Clean Energy, they included this concept of what they termed a cost recovery charge. And that you can kind of think of that as their version of the PCIA that PG&E charges. The idea is that if we're a few years down the line and the program has made resource commitments, contracted for power, and the customer wants to leave, that if those costs, if that leaves costs behind, stranded costs that would cause other customers to pay for them, there could be a charge for that. We didn't include that concept in this draft plan, but that is something that has been considered by other CCE programs. Marin has never adopted an actual charge for that. They have it as essentially, it's discussed in their implementation plan, and it would be set by the board if it were ever to be applied, but they sort of have that as a placeholder. Again, we didn't include that here, but it's something if that's important. The reason it's there, I mean, maybe it's self-evident, but the reason it's there is it can help to make the program look more creditworthy from either your power supplier's perspective, or if you're looking to issue bonds to develop projects. The question's always, well, your customers can leave at any time. What happens if they leave and you can't pay your bills or your bonds? So that can be a protection for that, some additional credit assurance, much like PG&E has on the PCA side. But obviously there's some downsides to that. I mean, customers may freak people out, right? If you say we might hit you with this charge, and so it's really, that we've included this as kind of just a nominal fee to, you think of it as maybe somewhat discourage customers from leaving or cover your administrative cost of processing it. It's just, but even this doesn't have to be there. So, it's really up to.
Just a couple of clarifying things, if I may, John. I seem to recall in emails or conversations with you that at least one of the CCEs, while they have the right to charge these, they have this in their implementation plan, do not charge these fees that opt out.
That's my understanding that, let's say if the customer says, well, I don't want to pay that, they generally waive it.
You have to complain, though.
I've heard different things, but that's my general understanding, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, to be honest on this one, I think this is something that I hadn't relatively new in learning about, and I think the board will want to discuss how it wants to proceed here. Because I mean, we've certainly marketed this as something where you have kind of a free choice. So, I think I'll be interested in learning more about how necessary this is, particularly in the first few years, say, where you kind of want. I would like to give the customer feel like they really are not restricted, but
Yeah.
and also just to also clarify, I think I heard you say that there's really kind of two fees. One that you've captured here, which is this, nominal fee that some CCs charge. And then I guess there's another fee, which we'll call it the stranded cost fee, which you haven't put in this document. And that's a whole other bucket. That's a whole other set of issues. That could be much more expensive.
Yeah, in that one, you don't really know. You can't say what it is here. We can say it's $5, right? But that.
Is it $5 intended to capture the stranded cost?
No.
That's just processing.
No, because the stranded cost, it's going to depend on what happens to prevailing market prices at the time customers want to depart.
Right.
So, it could be zero if your supply contracts are kind of below market or at market, but if your portfolio is above market, the way the utilities is now, then you'd probably, if you were to go with that type of a approach, the board would probably set that charge.
Yeah. Which again, no CC has done so far.
No. So MCE has, I guess, a placeholder, but it's always been zero.
Okay.
And then Sonoma decided not to adopt that type of a charge, but they do have this type of a fee.
Okay.
And I think Lancaster has this type of fee as well.
It's one other observation. The lingo here often gets people confused. In fact, it confused one of our local journalists when we talk about opt-out fees. So there was, as for many of you saw, there was an article in the San Mateo Daily Journal which implied that if you opted out, it would cost you $18. But I think what the journalist really was thinking about was the PCIA charge, which you do have to pay, if you're a CCA customer, but it's baked into your overall total electric power bill, and you still come out hopefully under PG&E's costs. So I know Marty had asked a question about that, and I don't know if I articulated it very clearly, but sometimes PCIA gets confused with opt-out fees, and I know in many of my presentations on this, I've emphasized the PCIA fee and how that's really not detrimental to the customer because, again, they still end up with an aggregate bill that's slightly lower than PG&E. And then when I typically refer to opt-out, that there wouldn't be an opt-out fee along these lines, but maybe that's something for the board to think about.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, these fees are not so large where it's really going to generate a lot of money. I would see these as kind of placeholders too, just in case at some point you did want a more significant fee, and it's good to have this in your original plan. That's more of a placeholder in that regard. That's the way I would look at it. But if you're not comfortable with it, it certainly doesn't need to be in there.
And since no council member voted against this, maybe no one will opt out.
Dave, can I make a couple of comments on your observations?
Yes.
One is that the charge we are talking about, the stranded cost, is basically if a contract is take or pay, like either you use electricity and pay whatever you contracted for, or in cases where you have long-term contract which has substantial penalty if you don't use that. And if some of the customers leave who are supposed to be consuming that power that was coming under the contract, the remaining customers of CCA would bear the cost, which will be higher than their cost should be.
Right.
That's what the whole
Right.
logic is all about.
Right.
Now, PCIA is actually component of everybody. All the PG&E customers are paying right now PCIA built into their bills, except the ones who leave PG&E still end up paying, although no electricity is coming from PG&E. That's the problem.
I think Donnie had a question or a comment.
county can recoup the cost of setting up the JPA
Right.
work from the ratepayers. And I'm just curious what the mechanism and timing of that would look like, so we can explain that to our constituents.
Okay, so you're talking about the recovery of the county funds that have been put in?
Yeah, the startup costs.
Right. Okay. Thank you. That's a good question. So, what we have modeled in terms of the financial projections that are included in this plan is that the county would be repaid over a period of 3 years. So within 3 years, we baked in a little bit of interest. I don't think any of those terms have been really determined, so we're kind of making it up. But that's what we've assumed for purposes of this document.
And it just gets, is there a line item on their bill that says that?
No. So that would just be part of PCE's cost structure. So, PCE is going to aggregate all of its costs, power supply being the biggest one. That will be a small one, and then create a rate that recovers those costs in their entirety. It won't be all delineated out that way, other than in the budget that PCE will adopt.
Is it contemplated that you're paying off the bank credit facility that provides startup funding over the same period, or
5 years for that. That's our assumption. Again, that's subject to negotiation with the banks, but that's what we've planned around. Yeah. In fact, here's a table. Do we show maybe we don't show the county. That may be a good addition here. Is we have the bank financing, that startup cash of $12 million, but we should probably show how the county's repaid as well in that table.
And just, Lori.
Thanks. So I have a question about the net energy metering. It's mentioned in Chapter 6. So we talked at a previous meeting about what happens to existing customers who have solar on their roof and how they would get paid for their overage production, similar to how they are through PG&E, and that true up that happens at the end of the year. And I think someone had mentioned that with the PCE, the thought is to have it on a monthly basis, not just an annual basis. So would that concept have to be included in the implementation plan?
No, the details of that tariff, I'd call it, don't have to be included here. There is reference to PCE offering a NIM program, conceptually, more or less. And then what will happen before services is offered in October is, the details of that program will be established and adopted by the board eventually. And so, these other CCE programs have different ways. They've typically provided a higher payment for surplus energy than what's offered by the utilities. And there are some other differences in terms of, whether you sort of cash it out monthly or annually. It gets a little complicated, and it really does need to be developed as a separate program design. But that doesn't have to be detailed here.
So that would be kind of fleshed out by the JPA prior to launch?
Correct, yeah. Yeah, that's the idea, is that you would have a net energy metering program as well as a feed-in tariff that would be available. The net energy metering program for sure, because you want to have something for those customers. The feed-in tariff, that's maybe a little bit more discretionary. The feed-in tariff is really a wholesale contract that encourages local renewable generation. It's not rooftop. It's maybe if there's a brownfield somewhere or what have you that that you can put solar on, but in larger, maybe a megawatt or so. And that's just a mechanism to incentivize and encourage local renewable generation. But the NIM program, it's really kind of part and parcel of your rate structure. And if you didn't have it, it would be I think a pretty large gap. So that would be included from the start.
And if you haven't seen it, the staff put together a really nice FAQ on this issue, because we hear it all the time, and there are a few subtleties. I had one more question for you, John, if I may, which again something that maybe I'm learning for the first time. We say, let me just read it: customers electing to terminate service after the initial notification period, and later wish to reinstitute service with PCE. So I'm assuming these are people that they signed up with PCE originally, or were defaulted into PCE. Then they decide they want to go back to what, PG&E? And then they want to come, I mean,
Right.
Then they come back.
Yeah,
They can't
they come back.
Yeah.
It's always been clear to me that if you opt out into PG&E, PG&E makes you stay in for a year before you
Right.
come back. Right. But the way I read this, it sounds like once you do come back after that year, then you have to stay with us for a year too.
Right.
Which I wasn't aware of that, if I'm reading that correctly. In other words, it really is symmetrical. I thought it was asymmetrical.
Let us take a look at that sentence, because there are restrictions in that scenario where a customer, if they want to return to PG&E, has to provide advance notice. But I think it's actually 6 months now. So this may be old language, but let's check back on that one.
Yeah, I saw that too, and to me it seemed like a little bit burdensome. Like, you want to encourage customers to come back and to say, well, you can come back, but you've got to stay for at least a year. I don't know what the reasoning
Yeah.
was that maybe, for.
I think it's really a PG&E requirement. This isn't written all that greatly, so let us tweak that one.
Okay, thank you. Donna.
I'm wondering if the reasoning behind that isn't to prevent if our rates should temporarily exceed PG&E triggers and things.
Yeah,
We don't
not
have
a
people
game
bouncing back and forth.
Right.
I mean, that's people's inclination, right? Can be.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah.
And I just don't want you guys to be in a situation where you're having to handle the administrative side of all that. I don't really care if people leave or come back or forth, but you guys have to figure out what your administrative capabilities are in that,
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, go ahead, Wayne.
Quick question, is there like a credit rating that applies to us? Is there something we have to, does that apply in this situation when you're going for the bank's loans?
Right. Thank you. We wouldn't be able to get a credit rating right now. So it would be nice, but the credit rating would come later after several years probably of successful operations. So, that's subject to negotiation. Are the banks going to ask for any credit support? What's the nature of that credit support? To be determined. I can tell you some other programs, there have been guarantees that have been required. In the case of Marin, I think the county was required to guarantee that initial bank load for a period of time. It was, I think, lifted after 12 months. I think Lancaster self-funded theirs. That's a single city program, and they just self-funded their startup costs and get paid back through the program. So that one's to be determined, but I think because it's a startup entity, we wouldn't be able to go through a credit rating process and get an acceptable rating. It's just needs to be in operation for a while.
So the more money we put up front, then the more willing to give us a more reasonable or favorable interest rate.
I think that's fair. Yeah.
Any further questions? I think you've gotten through. Yeah, we were at the end.
Yeah, I'm
of
through.
the presentation.
Through everything.
So any final questions for John? It's just past 9. Susan?
Comment. I understand from the only one of the few city council meetings that had any real discussion in it was South San Francisco. And I want to say what I heard through other members of the league that were there were questions about oversight. And I wanted to, I haven't seen anything really in here. I know it's going to be a public, the board meetings will be public. But is there anything else about oversight that should be part of this plan? And I'm putting it out pretty broadly because I'm not sure what it needs to be.
I mean, Freddie, if you might want to comment on what you think the concern was among some of the residents. I mean, my takeaway was along the lines of, is a board of 20 public officials, from all walks of life, going to have the wherewithal to make sure this thing happens right? And I think that was kind of the concern voiced by some.
Yes, yes, I think that was the major thrust, namely that like PG&E has their professional departments and staffs and all that, can we manage this PCE equally well without having the experience? So that was a broad question that was raised, and I think that the response that we made, I think you were there, was basically that the JPA board will be like a board of a company. Even PG&E board has a lot of non-utility folks out there who are investors, basically. But the PG&E operation, same thing will be PCE, will be actually managed and run and controlled by professionals in some capacity, either as part of the PCE or contracted out. That's the way I see it.
We'll have, obviously the hiring of a CEO is of paramount importance, and building the internal staff. That there'll be professional advisors like EA, I think, works with all the existing CCAs, if I'm not mistaken. I often answer the question a little bit like the Samsara Investment Fund. They're responsible for billions of dollars of investment, and they use a combination of in-house staff and outside money advisors, but they also have a board of regular people. Go ahead, Lance.
But actually, the California Public Utilities Commission acts as on rates as the oversight board for the privately owned utilities, and they expend a great amount of money explaining, justifying their rates. I think
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
It's not quite as, it would be more parochial and narrow here, and I don't think there would be, in terms of rates, I don't think there's a huge problem with that. As long as the energy markets continue the way they are, it should be relatively benign in terms of Category 1 energy.
And may I add that one of the major oversight on PCE rates and tariffs would be the comparative nature of the business with respect to PG&E rates. So I think it's a self-correcting mechanism.
Donna?
So what I was going to point out is, if this is like essentially a corporate board, it might behoove us to each and every one, I know we have a myriad group of backgrounds here, to understand what everybody's backgrounds and expertise are. Because, for example, mine is finance and accounting, so if you had a finance committee or an audit committee, that's where I would be comfortable. I don't know as much about the energy side of it, so maybe there are other people who have marketing expertise, different things. And then when you put your committees together, like you would on any board, you would be able to match people's expertise with the committees along with yours as well. It would make a lot of sense. People with construction or whatever.
I hear what you're saying, but at least in my experience, what's been very helpful with me, for instance, on the SamTrans board, is to have the opportunity to learn about different facets of the organization's business by being on the different committees. And I also just want to make sure we remember that we're policymakers, not running the show.
Right,
Because when we step over that line, bad things happen.
But I still think that in terms of being able to contribute, I just know myself, there's certain things I'd kind of feel more comfortable in initially, and then as I learn, I do feel a little more comfortable in other areas. And usually people will be on sometimes two committees, so it's a nice way to find it.
Okay, good comments. So we should probably wrap up. Any final questions for John? All right, thanks for your time, John, and your good work, as always.
Thank you.
We're lucky to have your professional guidance and incredible depth of knowledge. So we'll go ahead and adjourn once again. Oh, I'm sorry.
One question. Can I get the full body of this document on the website?
It is on the website now.
Okay.
And we might have... Yeah, I found it. It's a little hard. We're going to get adjourned. Thank you.
One comment.
I'm sorry, Jim.
I just want to be able to segue everybody into our next meeting, which is 4 weeks from tonight. And so the first meeting of the JPA will be meeting here Thursday, March 24th at 7 p.m. And so the initial part, we're going to have John back here again to really talk about the implementation plan and really nailing down that. And then following, a week later, we'll be returning for a second board meeting there in the month of March. So we're trying to figure out the meetings in April, but for now, for sure, we will be going with the fourth Thursday, and so there's a doodle poll that's going to be going out relative to trying to figure out within that second week of the month what might be an opportunity for people to meet these first 3 or 4 months with double meetings. So anyways, that's all I have to add, and thank you very much.
Dave, you had a comment?
Yeah, I had this comment. This is the last meeting of the advisory group, and I wanted to personally, I'm sure you all feel the same way, appreciate the hard work and persistence that is shown by the supervisors, Dave Pine and Carol Groom, in carrying this concept in June from just an idea to the fruition of this whole county doing this in a very significant way with respect to concern with our environment and also how people can interact and make it happen, even new concepts like this. So I wanted to just congratulate both supervisors.
Yeah. And again, as you all know, we've had a superb internal team and a superb set of outside consultants. So
Jim and Kirsten and Gordon and David. Yeah.
And so it's been we meet every week for an hour as a team, and we've just been able to knock down the issues, and with your help, we've come a long way. So thank you again.